Hi everybody, TJ Mack of Vintage Cards and Nostalgia here. I wasn't planning on making a video this week, but with Pete Rose's passing, I felt I had to share my thoughts, not just on Rose, but on childhood heroes in general, and how, as we get older, the way we see our heroes, it can change, and it oftentimes becomes more complicated. Now, there's a strange and powerful tension between nostalgia and history. One that we all experience in different ways. You see, nostalgia, it wraps our memories in warmth, smoothing out the rough edges and letting us relive moments of joy, wonder, and innocence. History, on the other hand, reminds us that things aren't quite so simple. It demands a full accounting of the facts, the warts and all. And it's this paradox that becomes evident when we look at the players we collect. Now today I want to talk about 4 great players who meant a lot to me as a kid. Now back then, sports, they seemed pure and even innocent. A world where athletic greatness was all that mattered. But you see, as time goes on, that simplicity becomes layered with complexity. Nostalgia isn't just about remembering the games or the highlights. It's about reconciling those moments with the fuller picture that life reveals over the years. These players, once idols, now have stories that stretch beyond their time on the field. And for me, that creates tension sometimes. There is a delicate balance between admiration and the acknowledgement of their flaws. Now, these men whose careers shaped much of my youth now stand as symbols of both greatness and controversy. Yet, despite all of that, they still hold a very special place within my collection. When I think of Pete Rose, I remember a man who played baseball with unmatched ferocity. As a kid, I can still picture Rose sliding headfirst into base, his hair flying in the breeze. And my friends and I even called it the Pete Rose slide, because no one did it like him. His nickname, Charlie Hustle, well, it wasn't just a name, it embodied a mentality. Rose, he stood for grit and determination. However, as I grew older, I was exposed to the other side of Rose, the betting on baseball, the self-importance that he would often show, and I had a feel from him that he thought he was larger than the game. But as the years went on, I actually started to feel sorry for Rose. He paid a huge price for his actions by being banished from the game he loved, probably more than anything else. And he died this past week, never getting the sense of accomplishment that goes with seeing your plaque hang in Cooperstown. What I think most when I see this Rose card in my collection, it's not the banishment from baseball, but rather the joy and inspiration he gave me. The thrill of watching someone so passionate, so driven. To me, this card represents that fire, even if it is flawed. Kirby Puckett, he's another player who drew me in. Like Yogi Berra, he didn't exactly look like a ball player. He was 5'8", 210 pounds. He is often described as a bowling ball, a teddy bear, or Yoda in cleats. But my favorite description of him by far is that he looked like a hastily packed duffel bag. But man, could that guy hit. And he played a pretty good field too. His 1987 Donruss card captures the joy to me that he brought to the game. You see, his smile was infectious. His play was electric. He made you believe that baseball was more than just a game. It was a celebration of life itself. And I think back to that 1991 World Series and his game-winning heroics, and that thrill, it just comes rushing back. But time, it also revealed a more complicated side of Puckett's life. I started hearing stories of sexual misconduct, and that he wasn't quite the same person behind that smile. And it damaged his image to many. Yet when I look at this card, I see the player who gave his all, who played with a childlike exuberance. And it's that memory for me that just stays with me, in spite of those later revelations. I've learned that the two can coexist. And this card reminds me that life, like the people we admire, is rarely simple. Mark McGWIRE was my favorite player after Reggie Jackson retired. From his rookie year in 1987, when he hit 49 home runs, I was hooked on collecting his cards. By 1990, I had over 100 different McGWIRE cards, and I was always on the hunt for more at my local card shows. But by 1991, McGWIRE's batting average had dropped to .201, and his home runs had fallen from 39 to 22. I remember feeling stressed, worried that he was going to end up like Dave Kingman or Rob Deere instead of a Hall of Famer like Reggie Jackson or Harmon Killebrew. But in 1992, McGWIRE made a comeback. He showed up with an edgier look. You can see it here. He had longer hair, a goatee, and more muscle. He equaled his 1991 total of 22 home runs in just 68 games, and people were talking about him breaking Maris's record. I still have this Sports Illustrated from June 1st, 1992. It came out just weeks before I graduated from high school. It reminds me of that exciting time. Now, of course, we know the full story. McGWIRE's career became tainted by the steroid era. Despite that, I can't forget the thrill of those home runs, the joy of that moment in my life where I'm leaving my childhood behind as I embark to college, and I get to see one of my childhood heroes make a comeback. Now, this magazine, it brings me back to that time, despite the shadow over his achievements. It's a reminder that even in the flawed, there's something worth remembering. And finally, there's O.J. Simpson, the most controversial of all. His actions beyond the field are shocking and unforgettable. I was 19 years old at a nightclub on Clifton Hill in Canada on the night of June 17, 1994. The whole bar was gathered around the TVs, drinks in hand, watching a surreal split screen where you had Game 5 of the NBA Finals between the Knicks and Rockets on one side and the infamous white Bronco chase on the other. Now, growing up near Buffalo, OJ, he was a legend. His athleticism and otherworldly abilities, and then he had his charm, which were also undeniable. Though I don't remember his playing career firsthand, his legacy still resonated with me. The first OJ card I ever owned was probably around 1979 or 1980, and it was this 1979 Topps card with him on the 49ers. And as a kid, I'd pick up his cards at shops or shows, and like Walter Payton and Jim Brown, they were always in high demand. But then, of course, came his fall. One of the most publicized legal dramas in history. Now, collecting his cards in some ways is not easy, and it's certainly not uncomplicated, but it's one I still choose to make. It forces me to confront the fullness of his story, the greatness and the infamy. His cards remind me that even our heroes can fall and that their stories are often filled with light and even extreme darkness. Now, these players, they're part of the story of my collection because they let me hold on to something precious. Memories of moments that shaped my love of sports. Memories of athletes who made the impossible seem within reach. But they also remind me of the complexity of life itself. Now, none of these men are simply their best moments, nor are they just their worst. They're a mix of both. And so are we all. Holding their cards means holding both nostalgia and history, honoring the joy that they brought, while often we have to acknowledge the complicated legacies that they've left behind. Now, in the end, these cards remind me that we don't have to choose between the past we cherish and the truth we learn as we grow older. That both can coexist. Our heroes, like our memories, don't need to be perfect to be meaningful. They can be flawed and yet still hold a place in our hearts. And that's why I collect. That's why cards of these players, controversial as they may be, will always have a special place in my collection. They're not just pieces of cardboard. They're reflections of life, which can be messy, complicated, and beautiful, all at the same time. Everybody have a great week, and we'll talk again soon.